Yeah, hello everybody. My name is Luke McBain, recording the Leading into Meaning podcast, and today with Richard Lewine. Richard Lewine is a grand vizier and mentor who uses extensive life experience and wisdom to help change the lives of his clients. He's passionate about what he does and inspires those he works with to have a vision and look within to transform themselves and lead their businesses to great success. Richard is relentless in his approach and guides his clients to set and achieve their most important goals. His methodology results in sustainable skills that positively impact people's careers, the bottom line of their businesses, and their personal lives. Hello, Richard. It's great to have you.
Hi, Luke. It's good to be with you. Your reputation precedes you, so I'm very glad to be here with you.
Well, it's very kind of you. I'm just, when I read your bio and I read what you do, and what interested me about having this conversation is your experience in the field. I come more from the theoretical background, and I have some experience, but not like you. And even in your description, I find some very interesting key points, like the word grand vizier, which I find even difficult to pronounce, which I find an exotic description. And I'm wondering what that is and why you chose that word. Maybe we can just start with you as a person. And why did you choose that word?
Interesting. I didn't choose it. A magazine many years ago called Boardroom described me that way.
Okay.
And it resonated with the people in my organization and with my clients who read the brief write-up and said, yeah, that is pretty much what you do. And a grand vizier in the old days, as it were, when the monarchs and kings were rampant, if you will, they needed somebody to keep them on track or they could run wild. And the grand vizier was the one who held up their hand and said, wait a minute, why are you making that kind of a decision? Can't you see the downside of that is huge, or whatever they said? They were I was going to say keeper of the exchequer. They weren't really, but they made sure that the king didn't give the kingdom away.
I see. So, I mean, that's an interesting description, because it also reminds me a little bit of the role of the fool at the king's court. I mean, the fool didn't have any power and not much, I would say, technical knowledge about governance, but he was permitted to speak always the truth to power, right? Now the grand vizier, I think he had also some power. Like he wasn't just somebody who spoke truth to power, but he also was able to make decisions.
He was.
So it's interesting that you chose that they saw you rather in that category than the category of the fool at the king's court. So.
And I'm thankful for that. I don't like the fool's hats. I don't, and the shoes that they wear, and the scepter that didn't turn me on. So this is much better.
I see. And what I also found interesting about your bio is that you write the methodology results in positively impacting people's careers, okay, bottom line of their businesses, okay, and their personal lives. And I just stumbled across that because just recently I was working with a client who said, who worked with me and said, oh, it's good that you don't separate these issues so much, that you see everything as a whole. And I just rediscovered that in your bio. How do you, let me ask you more frankly, why do you put that in one sentence, all these things?
If one is not, has not spent the time and effort and involvement to develop their personal leadership, so that they know who they are, where they're going, why they're going, how they're getting there, then they're going to have a very difficult time leading anybody else. Because if I can't tell you answer all of those questions, why should you bother being with me? It doesn't make any sense, just from a humanistic point of view. So one of the differentiators of what I do compared to others is that if I have to work with the leader of the organization, the ultimate leader, whatever his or her title, it doesn't even matter what it is. And it can be a 3-person organization or a 300-person organization. I don't work in corporate as it is generally described. If I can't talk to the boss, I'm not interested. That's where both the problems and the solutions lie. So it's getting the leader to clearly define their goals and to help them understand that in most cases, small to mid-sized organizations exist for the benefit of the owner leader. The world does not need another small business in an economic sense. It just doesn't need what that business is producing, in my experience, because there's 57 others that are producing the same thing, perhaps in a different color or a different size. But they can always jigger their equipment to make it the same color and the same size. So the unique aspect of a small business is that it meets the needs of leadership, of ownership, depending on the makeup. It could be a paid leader, even at a smaller size, like 50 or 60 people. But generally speaking, the founder or the family member is at the head of the ship, is the helmsman. And if they don't understand that that's why their company exists, then they make decisions based on false premises. And that's why I say what I do, and that these things are combined. It's one. There's a holistic, there's a gestalt, put any phrase on it that you care to, but it's only one entity. I hope I'm answering your question.
Well, it's a very fascinating statement for me, and I'd like to dig a little bit deeper. And there's many reasons why I found that statement interesting. Also, that you said just gestalt, which is something I dug into, also gestalt therapy. But back to your question, can you repeat that again? Because it was so interesting to hear that. Is that the purpose of the business is to serve leadership? Is that
ownership?
Ownership, yeah. Or leadership, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
not leadership if it's a paid hired gun. It is. Here's a better example, if you will. There's an entity that is known as a family office, not a family business, but a family office. And a family office is brought into existence to both husband and steward the enormous wealth generated perhaps by a family business. And there is the need to protect it for future generations or to reinvest it, whatever the family decides to do with it. So a family office usually, and there's a little controversy about this, you need to have an asset of 100 million or more. And there are a couple of leaders in that realm who say it needs to be 500 million. You need 500 million, or it doesn't pay to have a true family office, because a family office is a small business. Its business is husbanding the funds, the wealth, the assets, the investments, whether it be in real estate or other businesses, for the family. That's why it's called a family office. It is an entity brought into light to protect what has already been produced, developed, so that it remains viable over the long term. And there's a phrase that is used about the investment attitude of a family office. It's called patient funds or patient investments. Long term, we have plenty of time. We're going to be here. It's not a VC, a virtual, investment company. They don't want to sell it in 3 years and get their money back. That's not what a family office is about. It's for the long haul. It's for 10, 15, 20 years that they will make an investment. So a virtual capitalist is a very different thing. And there's a movement now afoot, both intentional on the family office side and unintentional in those seeking funding, to seek it from family offices, because they will not be breathing down the neck of the founders and operators of this new business, perhaps a startup or something in high tech that is fast. Everything is in a hurry. They will be more patient. So it's a different mindset than a venture capitalist or private capital. There's lots of terms for this loose money, and there's a lot of it out there. And so again, we're talking about the leaders of a family office were the leaders in the owners, because they can pay a CEO to run a family office if it's big enough, if it generates enough. But the owners, the family name, there was a cartoon in the New Yorker many years ago that ran in every week. It said, a name on the door rates a Bigelow on the floor, which is a carpet. It was. I don't know if they're still in business. Well, the name on the door of a family office is the family. It could be Buffett. It could be Zuckerberg. It could be Ellison. It could be Rockefeller. It could be Vanderbilt. It doesn't matter. That family office, like a family business, small one, is running for the benefit of that name. I hope that helps. Maybe it confuses you more. I don't know.
No. I mean, I understand. So you obviously you distinguish between ownership and a family-owned business and leadership, which can be, as you say, just a hired gun. So that's where you would make the distinction, basically, and
yes.
You say that the business should serve the family, right? So, or should serve the owners,
the founder, or the founders. Yes.
All right. So is that
it isn't? It isn't a question of should. Shoulds create lots of problems. I mean, not that we don't use it, we do. It is designed to do so. Now, if it isn't, it is because whoever is leading, whoever is driving the organization and its operation isn't getting the job done the way it was intended. Does that make sense to you?
It makes sense. My question is more so, when you work with people, do you then work differently with the leaders of that organization, depending if they're also the owners, or is there a different approach then evolved when you work with your clients?
A well-posited question. Since I work in the small to mid-size arena, 98.6%, I'm picking hyperbole to make the point, are owner operators. They are the family, the founder. It may not be a whole family. The founder is generally the leader that I'll be working with. And it's that person that I help to understand or disabuse them of the concept that they believe that the world needs their business and that's why they're doing things. No, the world does not. You need it. That's why you're still here after 47 years, because you want it, like it, need it, whatever your driver is. If it's a paid leader, depending on who they are, how they got there, and the mandate they have been given by ownership, I may deal with them the same way. If everything is going along, the chances are I'm not there. Contrary to the reality, if everything's going along, that's another reason to bring someone like myself in to ensure that it continues to do that, which is a result of my the principle that I operate on. RSL, my initials, look like that's why my company is named RSL. It's not. It's because responsible, sustainable leadership is what it's about. So a hired gun needs to be responsible and needs to be able to make decisions that are sustainable in their leadership responsibilities. So it's a systemic thing. And I have a friend, in fact, you worked with Daniel Eds, who is a proponent of systemic leadership. It pervades the organization. And I agree with that. It's leadership is a slippery slope if it is looked at as this single ultimate person who's the boss no matter what. No, that's not what it's about. If in today's world in particular, if one is going to perpetuate the entity, it needs to be looked at in a much broader sense. In my view, these are all my opinions. These are assessments as opposed to assertions, but I have 40 years worth of grounding, but they're my grounding.
Coming back to this point where you work with the owner founders on this subject matter, where you make this proposition, the world has not waited for another business in X, Y, and Z because there's so many others out there. Can you give us an example how that process worked, and how, when you confront your clients with that statement, how they respond and how you get them to recognize that it's also about them? As like, can you give us an example?
I was, I lived in Greenwich, Connecticut for 5 years, and became connected to, I became involved in the Chamber of Commerce there. And I made a presentation one evening to a few people. And one of them was, I have to be careful because he's an outstanding guy in his field, is in a particular business there. And he liked what I presented. And what I presented was a discussion about the potential inside of people, whether they're leaders or followers. They're just, the human being has so much untapped potential that it's amazing. We can't even believe it when we're exposed to it. Then I have a concept I deliver. And he liked what he heard. And he said, yeah, give me a call. Come on over. I want to talk to you. At the time, he had, I think, 18 or 20 people in his organization. And we had a good, frank opening discussion. And the discussion was led to the place where he began to see that he was the reason he was having issues with his people. So we went down that path, began to examine it, and it didn't take long. I don't give a lot of it away, enough to make sure there's understanding, that there's a rapport, that it's closer to rapprochement, that we're really connected in the concepts that we're talking about. And he engaged me. That was after, just so he had two exposures to me. The first was this concept of tapping potential, unused, and all of that good stuff. And there's a lot of people in your organization who's also, their potential's not used. And how are you dealing with them? And then sitting with him, getting him to see that he had the ultimate responsibility to ensure the viability, integrity, longevity of his organization. It didn't depend on anyone else. Once we got that established, he committed to going through a one-on-one personal leadership development program with me that is designed to run from 6 to 9 months. And what happened is not unusual, but what happened was about 3 months into the process, he says, my people need to go through this. So what happens when one begins to be honest with themselves about who they are, where they are, how they're going, all of those good things that people talk about, and they begin to relate it to what they're doing on a day-to-day basis and who they're surrounded with and who they're ostensibly leading down this path, he discovered lots of things. For instance, the path wasn't clear because the destination or the vision wasn't clear. He had never articulated the vision, a paint by the numbers picture. So how could his people know where he wanted to go? They couldn't. That's what I mean by this. They need to know what you want, and you need to be clear first before you can tell them what you want. So that's how this process of it's one entity. You are the reason it exists, and you are its salvation if it needs it. If you don't do your job, which is clarify, communicate, support the people who are in the organization, to and with the people in the organization who you are asking to perform, then it is only yourself that you have to point the finger to for the lousy performance. If you've hired the right people. which is a whole other aspect. That's now we're into organization development, which is what I am. I'm an organization development consultant. That's what I do.
And did his relationship change towards his business? Did he see it then after or during this process in a different way? And how he viewed the relationship between himself and how did that change?
It reached the point that he didn't know how long he's now 60-ish. At the time, let me get my years straight. We've been in here for 9 years, so it was in the early teens. Yes, in the early preteen, late preteen and early teens that I worked with him. The 2013, 2012, 2014, in that arena that I was in Greenwich. I mean, actually, my work continued using Zoom way after I left Greenwich. So what happened was, as he and his people developed, and they involved themselves in different kinds of different specifically targeted programs of development. And it's development, not training. We're developing people. We're developing their capability. We're developing their knowledge about themselves, about what they can do. So some of them were involved in middle management development programs. Others were developed in productivity development. So what happened with the leader was he saw that he had not enabled his people. Today it's called empowering. He had not empowered them. He had to make every decision. He was the one that said yes or no. The customers and clients wouldn't talk to anyone but him. And that was because he had not empowered his people. And they kept coming to him for yes, no, should I do this? Shouldn't I do this? And this is, I will tell you, upper level, high net worth were his clients. It didn't matter what the business was he was in or is in. And now it's 10 years later, roughly, and he's in an exit program that he would not have been in had he not initially. I'm not saying it was a panacea for all the troubles that he or anyone else has, but it was an awakening for him. And I believe if you spoke to him, he would tell you that it was a factor in his development. And I have, metrics relative to the people and their productivity and videos and all kinds of stuff around that. And I have a lot of that from people. The city of Pompano Beach, where I live now, is a client, and 3-to-1 return on investment when they work through these development programs, which are different than strategic stuff. The visioning is not a development program. The program he went through initially that brought him to the place where he realized he needed a vision, which we did, went through that process. It's 2.5 days just by itself. They're different things, very different approaches, part of developing the organization, which really means developing the people.
That is really interesting. I mean, and what about his personal well-being? What did you see there in that time? Did you see a change?
More, less denial. Humans are incredibly denying, accepting. That's just a personal observation. We have a tool that we use for helping to identify the appropriate talent with the attributes to function in a given slot. And there are 2 validation scales on it. One of them is a level of distortion in how honest were you in answering these questions about how you would behave and perform under given circumstances. And it's on a stay 9. And being in Germany, you know what a stay 9 is. It's just 9 sections on a line. It's like a Likert scale, which is a 7, but it's the same thing. He went from a 7 to a 3 in levels of distortion of his view of how things were. rose-colored glasses, everything's okay, those kinds of things. Answering questions the way he wishes it were, as opposed to the way it is. Very human. That's a very human trait. I'm guilty, you're guilty. We may not think we are, but I know that we are. It's like we believe our memories are perfect, and they are as imperfect as they can get. Same deal. Anyhow, he made that move, which helped him be more honest and confront lack of performance in his people to find out why. If you don't know what the cause is, you can't do anything. It's taking aspirin. Well, that's old. Ibuprofen, because it hurts. But why does it hurt? That's what he began to discover, why it hurt.
Mm. And there's so much to unpack here. So the first thing, I guess, yeah. The first thing is, and also one of the reasons we got in touch was I read your post on the power of self-image. And I thought that immediately very fascinating because just as you were saying, we're all guilty of some form of self-delusion or how we would like to see ourselves or present ourselves to the world. And we're also afraid of being not perceived the way we are and all that. And it's, I'm really impressed by this story because sometimes it's difficult to break through that and say, well, the first thing is you have to see who you are, right? That, or maybe not the first, but it should be part of the process to discover who you
are
early on. And I agree. And I guess my question is, well, short of the fact that people actively ask you, help me to know who I am. I'm not sure if anybody ever asked you that question. How do you work with clients to make them become aware that this is really central to their leadership development?
The silence is my brain working. I used to say what you smell is the wood burning up here. Ask the question a different way, please.
Okay, so if we talk about self-image, and I believe for you it's an important question.
Yes.
How do you work with your clients to become aware that self-image is important and self-awareness of themselves is important and has a direct effect on what they are doing? Like, how do you get there?
That's the way you're getting to me. I ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
And if I go to, I'll take a different client. There was a time when I was on airplanes. Oh my God, it was awful. And that's when airlines paid travel agents 10% on every ticket they cut. And the travel agency had an association, and they were handing me off one to the other around the country, not internationally, but around the country. And fortunately, they were paying to fly us and get stuff done. So one of my clients in California, a corporate travel agency, had a paid president and an active owner. It was, now that I'm recounting, this has been a long time, but the picture is so clearer today than it was then. The disparity between the way the paid leader saw the company and its future and the owner's view of the company and its future were not quite day and night, but certainly evening. It was gray. And now I knew that it was not right. And well, here's what I had to do. I had to work with the two of them to come to an agreement that the paid leader had to leave. Because the owner he was committed to creating peripheral services and products around their corporate travel core. and the leader was a corporate travel person, period. The conflict is obvious. However, they thought it would work, and for some years it did because everything was hunky-dory and rosy, but that was when it began to change anyhow, and the airlines were already making noises of eliminating that commission. And when they did, it changed everything for corporate travel and travel agents. So I helped them. I don't make any decision ever for a client. I just don't. What I do is keep prodding and probing and asking until I get to, and what will happen if you do that? And what's going to happen if he does that? And then what does it mean for these people? On and on. It's just normal. I call it normal pursuit. It was clear that they were going to reach a point of animosity that would destroy the human connection that they had. So they were smart enough to say, okay, let's call it quits here. And the owner came back in and led the company. Now, because of the slow demise of the industry, they were done. All of my clients in that field were finished. 4 of them. Wow. You've resurrected a whole bunch of stuff in the archives that I haven't thought about in a long time. 4 of my clients in that industry, I helped, didn't create it. I helped them sell their businesses for cash to 2 major players in that field at numbers that were absolutely mind-blowing. Not because of what I did, except that I helped them see what they had to do. That's my job. My job is to help you look around at what's going on. I don't have any answers. Absolutely do not have answers. I have answers as to how come nothing's happening if you haven't told them this is why nothing's happening. What do you want to do about that? At any rate, they didn't make it because they weren't bought out. And that was also because of the owner. His attitude was one where he had all the answers. The 4 that did sell reached the point partly because of our work. And our work, what it does, it stimulates. It's a catalyst for them to make the changes they need to make in their beliefs, in their behaviors, in their attitudes, so that they help themselves get to where they want to go more easily, more expeditiously, less cost and less time. So the 4 that I helped do the sellout were different people than this other one. That was the difference. Now there were others too. And their family businesses were involved in there. I mean, as you said, there's so much to unpack. The point being that if one is, if I believed I had all the answers, one of 2 things would have happened. No, forget that. Okay. I would be, if either I was right or wrong. Now, I know I was wrong, but if I kept pursuing that, I would have been buried in one form or another. So I didn't pursue it. I had to come out of my denial. You know, one gets to be a consultant because they believe they have some answers to help people. That's, it's rather, what do I want to serve? It's self-serving. It's very self-serving. But there needs to be some of that in order to support what it takes to move from where I was, which was the apparel industry, into helping people. And the reason I got into this was leaving that because the people who at that time were running the apparel textile industry were animals, in my view. Just terrible. Didn't care about people at all. Zero concern about people. And I had to move somewhere where there was concern, which is organization development. It's all about the people. And I feel like I'm straying from the point here, a lot of tangential stuff going on, because you have brought up all kinds of old things. But they are the things that have kept me in the industry for as long as I've been here.
Yeah, so the way I understand it is that, as you say, to help people to realize who they are and what they should do, which would be best for them. In this example, also perhaps sell their business. You have to start asking them questions about themselves. Is that correct? So you go into this exploration mode together with them
Correct.
to
Yes.
see, are they even willing to shine light on their own personality, their own wishes, and so on.
And I have an ex-active client right now, fresh, 3 months, maybe 4 months. Worked with the founder 25 years ago, Chicago. Just he and his people. And surface, not real deep, but it was traveling back and forth. And we had a decent relationship, and then nothing for quite some time. And in the interim, 10 years ago, so about halfway through this particular 2-decade period, his son came into the business. So today, his son is now 40 or 41 years old with an MBA. I could stop the story there and you would have a handle on what may have happened. Because this MBA believes that he is the be-all, end-all and has all the answers, and I am no longer involved. That's what happened. And if I had taken that same tack, I don't have an MBA. I don't have any initials after my name. If I had taken the tack that I have the answers, I would have would have had no clients. I wouldn't be in business. We would not be having this discussion. So one needs to realize early on in our lives, I didn't realize it early enough, actually, for my purposes, that I needed to be listening and learning more than telling. And when I made that decision, that's when good things, really positive things began to happen, because I saw I was really helping. Instead of preaching, I was listening. So it's if one is open to the possibility that they could be even better than they are, even if they think they're good, there is almost no limit. At my advanced maturity, people would say, "Why are you still working?" Well, I have so much to do and so much to give. I'm not stopping. I'm just not. And my maturity is advanced. I will tell you, it's up there. But it keeps me vital. It's like my walk. I've been walking for 40 years, a minimum of 2 miles every morning. Now, obviously, I miss a day here and there, but I say I'd average 6 days a week for 40 years. I've been walking, started at 5 miles when I was a little younger, and now it's 2 miles. It's the same thing in the business. Just keep consistently doing the right thing, and things change because you do that. Because the right thing is to be open to new stuff. Yesterday, I spent an hour online with someone who was talking to me about a new learning system for online learning or for virtual learning. And it's precisely what I was looking for to do what I want to do with my business. And it's relatively new. There are lots of, they're called LMS. Learning management systems. This one is just years ahead of these others, which are kludgy, the technical ones. In my opinion, these are my opinions. Almost everything I'm saying is my opinion. This one is not kludgy. It is click, click, click. It works. So I'm open to that. If I wasn't open to that, well, here I go. I continue doing the same old thing and get the same old result. Not that it's bad, but I'm not really introducing my client to perhaps a better way to involve their people in growth that takes into account the significant magnitude of change in society and business in the reduction of time available and attention spans. I mean, we're talking about significant reductions in these. Again, this is observation, not just my personal assessment. people are not willing to spend the time that they used to in learning something new. They want a quick fix. And the younger they are, the quicker fixer they want. So this new system meets that requirement, and I will still get what I want on the other end of an effective process that has measurable improvement in performance. That's what I'm always after, a measurable improvement in performance.
What I find very interesting and telling is that, I mean, it starts from a very small point, I would say, in terms of starting with some form of introspection, but this introspection can lead to massive changes and also improvements in terms of how business is done and what profits the business can generate. And you were giving also this example of how the businesses were sold at a, at a very good price. And that is, how to say it, that is very, very interesting to hear, I think, and very telling. And it's very informative for anybody who has not started that journey of introspection.
Yes.
Because you do also see some leaders who have not started that journey yet. And maybe the son who has this MBA has not started that journey yet. Maybe it's still in front of him. I don't know what the reason is behind that, because apparently, good things are in that introspection. It's not just all bad. It doesn't mean you just discover your shadow or your neurosis. You discover new ideas, new relationships, new ways of solving problems, and they will have massive, massive impact on your organization, right? That's how I read your story.
And that is true.
Yeah.
However, if someone is sitting like this with their hands up, then they're never going to have, never's a long time. They're not going to be able to avail themselves of the improvement, the growth, the evolution of themselves, because they're not allowing the catalyst in. Using the self-image graphic that I had put up and the brief description, and the brief description really does tell the story. You don't need 5 pages. Here's who I am. This I know I can prove about myself because I've done it. Now, if I want to enhance who I am and my output and results, whatever that is, whether it's money or relationships, then I need to be challenging myself to do something different and more of it, and then be somewhat successful and bring it in. Now I've expanded my self-image. Now I can do even more. Well, I have to be open to that because there's a risk. Well, the percentage, I don't know what the percentages are, but if I base it on what it takes for my colleagues in my field and myself to get a new client, to commit, I would say the percentages of those open, less than 3% of the business population. And I think there's there are statistics in the industry about that. And further, I think 1% is the number that are ready to do something when you get there. I think they're the numbers. 3% are willing and want it. 1% of that total population, when you call or are recommended, they're ready to say, okay, let's go. And my experience is it's worse than that.
Now, I don't want to leave our viewers or listeners on a negative note, because I think most of what you were saying was so positive in terms of what is all possible, what's possible, what the potential is. How do we get there? I mean, obviously you are able to connect to these 1%. That's
not easily, but yes.
And maybe also what is really interesting, I think, about this conversation is that you're not only able to connect to them, but you're also able to connect the inside change of a person to the outside change, which might be needed to complement that, right? So the inside world and the outside world both can be brought into synchronicity through your work. You're able to do both, the organizational work, the staff development, the structural development, but you're mainly interested, your starting point is the development of the owners, which
Leaders.
is
Yeah, that's right. Leader owner. That's correct.
from which basically then this change can be manifested into the organization, right? So that's your approach.
If the leader, and in this case, if the paid leader is open, and it happens, then as long as the leader will champion the process, it will be successful. If the ultimate leader either drops out or will not champion from the beginning, it will not work. I mean, will not. I have not seen it work without what the people call the boss buying into it and saying, yeah, we're going to do this, and me too. If that doesn't happen, it just doesn't sustain itself, because when I work with an organization, one of the images I work to get everyone to understand is the image of a organizational chart that you have in your mind needs to be flipped over upside down. Then things begin to work, because the reality is that singular individual, or maybe it's a partnership, is playing the role of Atlas and has the entire organization on his or her shoulders, because the responsibility of that person or that small group is to ensure that all of the resources required to enable those who are at the client customer touch level have what they need to deliver, whatever that means. And if there's a bunch of stuff in between, it needs to continue to flow up. And water has a tough time flowing up without a pump. And these guys are the pump.
And the heart is also a pump.
Yes.
Therefore, well, anyway, that's let's say that's a wonderful image you put out there to say, yeah, you need to be committed, and you have these possibilities because you have that in you, but let's go on that journey to discover those possibilities to make that happen.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Richard, it's been a real pleasure. I'm sure we could talk for another hour just about organizational development. I'm 100% sure we could do another session just on that topic. But you gotta stop when the going is good. I think that's
Yes, absolutely. Stop at the top. Thank you. Yes.
Richard, thank you very much. For anybody who sees this, is interested in Richard, I'll put the LinkedIn link and of your website, everything in the video description. So whoever sees this, wants to follow up with you, can do that.
Thank you.
It's been a real pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I feel the same way, Luke. Bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.
You too.